Hello, everyone. Father Bob Gross. It is 7:30 on Saturday, on All Souls Day, the 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time. We're starting tonight. Wanted to offer my homily tonight. It's going to be a busy Sunday. I'm traveling to Dubuque tomorrow for Father Tom McAndrew's funeral on Monday, a priest of the Archdiocese. So what I want to do is just share the homily I just shared, the last two Masses, and what I'll be sharing tomorrow. So, to give context, the gospel is the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector up in the sycamore tree, and how God calls him. Jesus wants to stay at his house. And then what I want to read, though, is the book of wisdom, the first reading. It's really one of the more beautiful scriptures in the book of wisdom. So let me read that because it's going to be part of the homily. So here it is. A reading from the book of wisdom. Before the Lord, the whole universe is as grain from a balance, or a drop of morning dew come down upon the earth. But you have mercy on all, because you can do all things. And you overlook people's sins, that they may repent. For you love all things that are, and loathe nothing that you have made. For what you hated, you would not have fashioned. And how can a thing remain unless you willed it, or be preserved, had it not been called forth by you? But you spare all things because they are yours, O Lord, and lover of souls. For your imperishable spirit is in all things. Therefore you rebuke offenders little by little, warn them and remind them of the sins they are committing, that they may abandon their wickedness and believe in you, O Lord. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This first reading is a wonderful canticle and praise to God's goodness. How good God is. He is infinitely good, infinitely transcendent, but immanent and close to us. He is in all things, but he is not the thing themselves. God is infinitely good. He never makes anything that he does not love. So if you're living and moving and breathing, you're loved because God is sustaining you. On this All Souls Day, I've been reflecting upon God's goodness, specifically through people in my life. And today on All Souls Day, I've been thinking a lot about my dad, Jerry Gross, who died 3 years ago. I've been praying for him today, and I'm reminded of a story that he told me that deeply influenced me in my call as a priest. And I want to share that with you. My dad, when he was an altar server, he belonged to St. John Nepomuk Catholic Church in Racine, Wisconsin, and he served Mass like every good Catholic boy did, and he served for a priest by the name of Monsignor Wheeler. And from the details that I gather from my dad, it looked like Monsignor Wheeler was kind of at the end of his life, and priests didn't retire back then. And he was a pretty old guy, and maybe was a little bit going off a little bit. And my dad would serve Mass for him. And the one thing that struck my dad when he served for Monsignor Wheeler was that he would get stuck at the consecration. When we get at the words, hoc est enim corpus meum, which is Latin for this is my body, he would keep on repeating it over and over again. He would get stuck there, spend several minutes over the words of consecration, and really brought out a deep sense of reverence for that moment. It influenced my dad deeply in his faith in the real presence, and he told me that story when I was 9 or 10 years old. And it really stuck with me. It sticks with me to this day. And during that same time that he told me that story, I was beginning to serve myself. And I remember going to serve for the first time, and my mom bought me my first pair of penny loafers and wore a nice pair of pants and a dress shirt, and I went to Mass and put on the alb and serve. And my parents and my siblings embarrassed me by bringing up the gifts at Mass. And then at the end of Mass, I went back into the sacristy, and there was a Augustinian brother by the name of Brother Patrick Strong. He was 5 foot nothing, 250 something. And he always had a 5 o'clock shadow and had a raspy voice and smelled like smoke. He was a smoker. And at the end, when I was getting ready to leave, he said, "Do you know what, Bobby? You would make a really good priest." And that put the first thought of priesthood into my mind. And I had a choice to respond to it. The goodness of Monsignor Wheeler influencing my dad telling me the story, and then seeing the witness of a very good holy man, Brother Patrick Strong, even though he was a little weird. And the other good people in my life, Mrs. Dory Madala, who taught me the rosary, the people that I knew in and out of church stuck with me. Priesthood was part of my mind and heart in high school, but I liked every single girl in the high school. 15, I thought about being a priest. Freshman year, when I went to Loras, I really thought about the priesthood. And then I met a girl in college and dated her for 2.5 years, and that's when I said no to God for the first time. I wanted to be in that relationship. But God was merciful. He overlooked my sins. He gave me another chance. He kept on inspiring in me the desire for priesthood. Even though I made many mistakes, I sinned often, I struggled in the spiritual life. And then God brought me to the seminary in the Archdiocese of Dubuque, the last place I thought I would ever be a priest. And he brought me into the priesthood, and now I'm here living in Calmer, serving 4 parishes, which I never thought I would ever be serving. Really what it is, it's responding to God's goodness in our life. That's what a vocation is. A vocation is responding to God's goodness in your life and not taking it for granted, but saying that God has been so infinitely good to you. Why not offer your life to Him in service? Here's the thing that I didn't tell the other 2 masses, which I'll probably tell tomorrow. When we were moving out of the house where I grew up and Mom was moving into her apartment, we went through his papers, and my sister found a letter that my dad got when he was a student at Loras College, and it was a rejection letter from the seminary. I found that very moving, that my dad thought about being a priest. But I'm really glad that he got rejected, or else I wouldn't be here. God wanted my dad to be married to my mom, so that they would have me. So God's goodness is always seeping through life. And do we pay attention to it? Do we take it for granted? Because we live in an over-practical world. Got to be able to do things instead of being things. And what I want to share is just briefly, I've learned a stat that in the Archdiocese of Dubuque back in 2001, we had about 1,400 weddings in the Archdiocese. Now we're just over 600 weddings. There's just a crisis of all vocations. It's not just priesthood. People are scared to commit. But it's in commitment that we really find our fulfillment. It's in commitment where we find our fulfillment. Having all the options, the counterfeit of freedom without any consequences that the last 50 years has given us, has been a complete and utter disaster. It leads to people choosing to abort their children. It leads to promiscuity and sexuality in a horrible way. It leads to profits at all costs and using people. So you're telling me with all that freedom, life is that much better now. I mention all this because it's the beginning of National Vocation Week, where we celebrate the vocations in the church: marriage, priesthood, religious life, dedicated single life. And we need them. We need people to commit to marriage, to have stable homes for children, to know that they're loved. And if they're in a family that is known and loved unconditionally and formed in faith, hope, and love, and living their Catholic faith, ministers rise out of that. Priests, bishops, deacons, religious sisters and brothers. People who are willing to do a regular lay career, but infuse their Catholic faith so much into it to bring good in the world. That's what motivated me on my discernment to be a priest. What is the vocation in which I can do the greatest good? Not make the most money, not to be the one that's in with status and titles, but it's the one in where I could do the greatest good. So I moved from politician to lawyer to teacher to professor to priest. That's where I was called to do the greatest good in the world. A vocation is our response to God's goodness. Are you responding to God's goodness, or are you taking that goodness as your own? Are you indifferent to that goodness and living your own life? God will not withdraw his goodness from you, but eventually you're going to be unsatisfied. So as you reflect on the readings, God's goodness is infinite. We are to respond to it in a vocation. We will feel unworthy like Zacchaeus, but God chooses us anyway. So if you're any inkling of thinking about being a priest, you should investigate it. If you feel so called to be married and be a father and a mother, go for it. If you have any thought of giving your life entirely to Christ in the religious life, go for it. If you feel called to be single and live completely in the lay state, generously and openly for the rest of your life, go for it. That's the renewal of the church. There will always be a remnant who will be generous in responding to God's goodness, and that's where the church's renewal and goodness and effectiveness will be, is by us responding to his goodness. I pray that you respond to it with great hope and charity. God bless you.